Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has opened, are you ready for this? What could be a can of worms by saying he would use the notwithstanding clause in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to bring in new laws dealing with violent offenders and hate crimes. Here's what he said, and I believe it was either Monday or Sunday or Monday. But here is what he said.
So the question is, do I respect Supreme Court decisions? The answer is yes. And I also respect the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees life, liberty, and the security of the person to every single Canadian. That right has been trampled on by the Liberals' catch and release laws that have unleashed crime and chaos in our communities. And I will use Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to put an end to the Liberal crime and drug wave and to protect law-abiding Canadians against the dangers that are spreading everywhere in our streets.
Liberal leader Mark Carney disagrees with that position.
I think this is a very dangerous step. We have a Charter of Rights and fundamental freedoms in this country, and it's the responsibility, in my view, of the Prime Minister, of the Government of Canada to defend that Charter, those fundamental rights and responsibilities and liberties that Canadians enjoy. The politicizing certain issues with respect to fundamental rights is a slippery slope that leads to further politicization. And but we will defend the Charter rights of Canadians on principle because it's the right thing to do.
No, I think it's wrong to do so. I think we should not be using the notwithstanding clause. And I'm concerned, and I mentioned this before, I'm concerned with the fact that it's being used more and more. Charter rights, human rights should not be things that we are willing to ignore or put to the side. And I'm worried that it's becoming more and more commonplace that the notwithstanding clause is being used.
So, what is the notwithstanding clause? Well, it allows federal or provincial legislatures to temporarily override certain rights and freedoms in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, specifically those found in Section 2, Fundamental Freedoms, and Sections 7 through 15, Legal Rights and Equality Rights. The clause gives elected governments the power to pass laws that operate notwithstanding the Charter, which means basically outside the Charter, for a renewable period of up to 5 years. A little bit of history on it. It was included as part of a compromise during the 1981 constitutional negotiations, especially to secure provincial support for the Charter, and is meant to preserve a balance between judicial authority and parliamentary sovereignty. And who can use it? Well, federal parliament, House of Commons and Senate, provincial or territorial legislatures. How often has it been used? Not one Canadian Prime Minister has used the
this would be a first
standing clause, so far. However, not quite the same for the provinces. Quebec is the most frequent user. Are we surprised? It was used, they used it proactively in all legislation from 1982 to 1985 after initially rejecting the Charter. And later uses include Bill 21, the banning some public employees from wearing religious symbols. Mm-hmm. And of course, Bill 96, right. The contentious language law. Saskatchewan has had a couple of goes at it. Alberta has threatened to use it, but Premier Danielle Smith backed away from it. And Ontario, Premier Doug Ford has used it a couple of times as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, when you start moving into that territory, I think that it's a bully type approach, dictatorial, and somewhat lazy. You don't want to take the time and energy to defend the law that you're about to impose upon us in the legislature or the House of Commons and have it properly debated by the elected representatives. It's you just railroad over all of that and just bully ahead for 5 years. And then at the end of the 5 years, you can do the same thing all over again because I think the Bill 21, well, yeah, it was in 2019, so 5 years, that's was expired in 2024, so I'm not sure. I don't remember seeing anything, but I've been more federally focused over the last couple of months, whether anything has come up in the National Assembly.
I have not seen anything brought up either.
Yeah. Maybe they don't want to bring it up. Maybe they just want to fly under the radar if possible and not, attract any attention from opponents and maybe, have it become a bit of a federal election issue here in Quebec as well. Who knows? Anyway, I just don't agree with it. I think, as I say, it's a lazy way to govern, and it's a rather dictatorial way because you're taking away rights that are guaranteed under the Charter of Rights and Freedom. And if that happens, then what the hell's the point of having the Charter of Rights and Freedom?
Yeah, when you have an open veto like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder in other countries that have similar parliamentarian systems for government, do other governments also have the option of exercising the equivalent of using that type of veto? I mean, I know in the United States they don't care anymore, but
that's
like
right.
Elsewhere, like in England or in France or Germany, a German parliament, do they do that? Do they have anything called a notwithstanding clause? Maybe this is something Christian can answer for us at one point too.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm sure there are some back doors available to them somewhere in their constitutions.
Yeah.
But how it's framed, I'm not sure. However, and if you look south of the border, the president has declared emergencies and signed, he must be into like about 200 now, executive orders to move things and just override the Constitution completely.
Yeah.
And again, that's going down a very, 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 very slippery slope. So it'll be interesting to see if Poilievre, if he forms government, he becomes the prime minister. If in fact he carries through with this and uses the notwithstanding clause. Now, if he has a majority, a solid majority, he has nothing to worry about.
Right.
Government passes. That's it. It's there, and then it has to get through the Senate. But very rarely do you see anything kicked back from the Senate.
Well, you know what I wonder though, Gary? I mean, what kind of brownie points was he thinking to get by having a position like that during an election campaign? I'm just not relating to it. Why would he actually go out and declare something like that? He must know it would create some sort of controversy for him, no?
I think that he's coming from the point of view that I want to really show I'm serious about getting tough on crime and keeping the repeat offenders behind bars, as he said at one campaign stop, keeping them behind bars, and the only way they're coming out is in a box.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with him on that.
Mm-hmm.
I totally don't disagree with him on that. But even though it's in public interest in the long run, to suspend those rights at that point in time and suspend my elected representative from debating it and
Right.
just going ahead with it. I have an issue with that. No,
Yeah.
I totally agree with what he's saying. They shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
coming out in anything but a box. There should be, no question. However, how you're going to achieve that, I think you have more support not using the notwithstanding clause.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that this is one that you're going to get a lot of support on the streets, no problem whatsoever. So,
Okay.
anyway, well, that's something to keep an eye on, because he's also talking about getting tough on hate crimes, and I have a very brief clip of him talking about that, if I can find it. Where was it? Just bear with me for a second. I had to juggle a couple of things around. Yeah, it's this one. Okay, so here's Pierre Poilievre talking about getting tough on hate crimes as well.
We'll be bringing in tougher laws that crack down on hate-based vandalism, on violence and targeted at places of worship. We will bring in more security for places of worship. And we will deport from Canada anyone here on a visitor visa who carries out any crime. And we will prioritize the deportation of those who carry out hate crimes and violence on our streets. Those who are permanent or citizens who do those things, they will go to jail. And they will also, on top of that, there will be massive, crippling financial penalties for hate-based vandalism. And I can assure you they will be penalties that are so massive that there will never be again some punk thinking even once about throwing a Molotov cocktail into a Jewish business or firing at a Jewish school. They will pay a severe price for that.
Can't disagree with them on that one.
Yeah. We've talked extensively about situations like that. So, I mean, for something like that, you certainly have to get tough. And both you and I have seen a lot of this stuff, especially during the Palestinian demonstrations at our universities here in Canada. And it was just gut-wrenching to see some of the damage and the vandalism that actually went through with very little punitive accountability, right? So I can see where he's going to get a lot of brownie points for sustaining that type of a position. And you know what? I'm 100% confident that that Mr. Carney and Mr. Singh, Prime Minister Carney, equally share that. They may just not be as verbose about it, but they share justice for all. Make sure people are adequately dealt with at trial as necessary to make sure that they minimize the amount of vandalism and crimes that can potentially be perpetrated out there.
Yeah, that clip, he was responding to a reporter's question, and on the weekend there had been a pro-Palestinian demonstration, and they marched into a mall, and they were inside the mall and shouting and hollering and going on. Police were called, but no arrests were made, and they were allowed to carry on because the police said they're not breaking any laws at the moment. Well, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's not a peaceful demonstration. Yeah.
Right. Number one, here's the thing. If the owner of the mall, yes, it's a public area, but you're there really as an invited guest by the owner of the mall. If the owner of the mall has demonstrators in the mall and carrying on in an unacceptable way in a surrounding like that, and people feeling intimidated, and you know damn well that people coming in with their little ones or a lot of older people would feel intimidated by that.
Well, for sure.
You've called the police to ask them to take control and get them off your property. And they say, well, they're not breaking any law. Yeah, they are. They're invading my space, my property, and I want them out of here.
Exactly.
If I'd been the owner of the mall, I would have picked up the phone, had the lawyer on speed dial and saying, get trespassing laws or charges or whatever the document is against these people now, and let the police serve them. But that's the one thing. Malls are public. They're open to the public, but they belong to someone, and the owner of the mall has the right to deny you entry to their property. Period. It's the same as you have the right to deny entry to some bozo to your unit. Well, or I have the right to deny entry to some bozo to my unit.
What would happen if you and I decided to... I guess I won't
be getting back into your place after saying that.
Well, Gary, I mean, what happens if you and I decided to hold hands and yell up and down the mall's aisle, screaming like Banshee Indians and yelling at people and whatever else? I guarantee you that both you and I would be out of there in handcuffs because there's only two of us. Now, because there is a group involved here and there is and I'm not going to say an unjustified need to protest what's going on over in the Middle East, but when you have a group of people that are being aggressive, from what I understand, they were pretty aggressive. You know what? It's the police responsibility to ensure that nobody gets hurt, and B, you get them off that property, just like you and I would have been taken off that property. And I really think that a lot of this has to do with orders that our police forces are given not to engage such parties because A, there are cameras rolling, B, you don't want to create a political statement misrepresenting your boss, the mayor of the city or whatnot. So they'll just try to, placate what's going on and just make sure there isn't any violence that goes outside of the protest group and everybody's safe. That's wrong, Gary. Look, in the good old days, even 20 years ago, the police moved in and out you went. Simple as that. Exactly. They just don't have the power or a level of comfort in doing that unless they get the undivided support from their superiors, being the commissioner of the police departments or the mayors of the city. The mayors of the city don't want that bad publicity on them, because certainly if a group of protesters are going to be removed forcefully out of an establishment, A, that's going to make the news. B, it's going to tarnish the reputation of whoever's running the city, one way or the other. So it's a lose-lose-lose situation. You and I as citizens lose. The people in the malls who are shopping and just going about their business lose. The police force loses, and the mayor loses. So nobody wins in this thing. So the way I look at it, what do you got to lose? Go in there and take care of business. And it's just a shame that our police force is handcuffed from doing anything about it. They just cannot do their jobs when it's necessary. So what happened in that demonstration was completely out of line as far as I'm concerned.
Deborah writes in, do you think the authorities in Canada fear the Palestinians? I think they fear the uproar over moving in on a culture.
Correct. Yeah.
That's what they fear. And you know what? I'm sorry. I don't buy into that argument at all. They're breaking the law. They're being disruptive. The party's over, folks. Like, it's time to move in. And, if there is some hollering and crying and squealing about, you're picking on this group or that group, it's very easy. You just look at them and say, well, if they'd behave and, work within what's acceptable social norms, they're no different than anyone else that we're dealing with on a Saturday night, or, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
move on or get arrested. One or the other. You have a choice. It's
Yeah.
as simple as that.
And both you and I are all for protests in peace. This is what makes our
Yeah.
country great. We've always allowed it. But then you have individuals or groups that disregard that particular rule, if you want to call it. You want to protest, go ahead. Do not be disruptive to society. It's as simple as that. When I say society, our university campuses, we're talking about shopping malls, hockey arenas, whatever the case is. If you don't have a permit to protest peacefully, I'm sorry, you should not be allowed to do that, and that's considered breaking the law. And if these individuals want to live in a country that abides by the law, you have to play by the law. Otherwise, you're in the wrong place. I mean, I don't know how I can put any simpler than that. Not taking away from the plight the Palestinians are in, or any organ or any group around the world that's in war right now, and the unfortunate atrocities that they're experiencing. I mean, I'd protest right with them, but I would be lawful. I'd never go on a university campus. I would never break into a private establishment. Excuse me. It's just wrong, and like I'll suffice it to say, Gary, again, I'll just summarize: the police have their hands are tied behind their backs, and I'm sure they were chomping at the bit to get them the hell out of there as well. Because look, you become a policeman to protect the law, protect people and the law, and I'm sure they're equally frustrated not being able to do their jobs properly.
Well, somebody has to answer for this at some point in the not too distant future, because yes, there is peaceful protest. Don't have a problem with it. And peaceful protest can be loud up to a point. Usually it's outside. You're not invading someone's space. You're in the great outdoors. And yes, maybe you're walking down the street or whatever, but you have to have the permit to do that. Peaceful protest, yes, but this is a form of vandalism in the fact that, you're disrupting people's lives. You're disrupting places of business, and it has to stop. No more sugarcoating this at all. It just has to stop. And if that means you say to the police, finally, somebody with the balls says, go in and get control of this. And they go in and they have to push a few people around and cuff a few or whatever happens, because those people then have a choice: either get out of the way and do what the police are telling them to do, whether they agree with it or not. Otherwise, they could end up getting hurt, not necessarily, not on purpose. I'm not saying on purpose, right. But stuff happens. But you have that choice. You're there or you're not. You get out of the way and do what you're told. And frankly, they have not been doing what they're told. They're not even being told anything anymore, because everybody's so sensitive. Nobody wants to, no, sensitivity days are gone. Psh, game over.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
This is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Manel writes, I thought people that were protesting needed to get some kind of a license, some kind of an approval from the government. If that's not happening, that's what should be happening. I think you're going to find that the approvals are like permits for parading down streets, and or getting permits in place for holding a gathering, like in some areas, like some parks and things like that. I don't think there's any permits being handed out to these people whatsoever.